Welcome to Church Experience Online. We're so happy you joined us today. As you watch this teaching video, if you have any questions or need help getting connected, please don't hesitate to reach out by phone or email. Also, our website is the best place to go if you'd like to access helpful growth step resources. Join a serving team, connect in a life group, get your questions answered, or support this movement financially by giving online. At the end of this teaching video, you'll hear one of our Church Experience Worship original songs, and we hope that gives you an opportunity to worship and reflect on what you've learned. Thanks again for joining us at Church Experience Online.
Well, everybody brings baggage into a marriage relationship, and the baggage that I brought into our marriage were boxes and boxes of sports cards. I brought them from my childhood, all the way from middle school to high school. I didn't get rid of them in my college or young adult years. I didn't even get rid of them when we got married. I couldn't. They were so valuable, right? I'd spent all these years as a child collecting them, putting them in little sleeves and organizing them and putting them in boxes. I had all my favorite players, and I wasn't about to get rid of them just because I grew up and grew out of collecting them. I still had them, right? So I brought those into the relationship, and I realized not long into it that those cards that I thought were so valuable when I was a kid were now not valuable at all. In fact, they call many of them common cards, meaning they were common, they were not worth a lot, they weren't valuable, and collectors put values on those common cards of about 5 cents. They say this is about what it's worth, and it's really not even worth that because no one will actually take them off your hands. They're just not worth anything. And so I realized that a lot of my cards had been collected during the 1990s. In the 1990s, they just killed the supply and demand curve because all these kids were clamoring for sports cards, and so they just kept producing them and cranking them out, so much so that they really decreased any real value in the cards. And so lots of kids grew up having these boxes of cards that were not valuable at all, and I was one of them. And when I realized this, I had kids at this point, and so I said, well, you know what? Instead of just getting rid of them, I'll give them to my kids. I'll let them have fun with them. And so they had fun throwing around the house and organizing them and stacking them, but they really didn't know who these players were. They were so young, they had no idea. And so they would come to me. I was their only reference point. And they'd say, Dad, who's this basketball player? Is he any good? And I'd say, well, yeah, he was all right. They'd say, well, Dad, what about this guy? Is he good? And I'd say, well, yeah, he was great. What about this guy? He was amazing. What about this one? And every once in a while, just for shock value, if I found one that was this common card, it was not valuable, I'd say, no, he was terrible. And I would, right there, just for fun, I would rip it right in front of their eyes. I'd say, he's terrible. And it's, Dad, what? And then they'd start laughing. And so they loved this. So they kept bringing them to me and asking me whether they were good or not. And I realized that these cards were not valuable. Many of them, they were really, truly worthless. We call guests here at CE VIPs. And we love to say, you're very important to God and you're very important to us. Because we believe that every person has value in this Easter message. The message of Christ coming for us, dying and being resurrected is really a message of value. It's a message of worth. That Jesus looked at us in our fallenness with all of our problems, and he didn't see us, even though we had all these issues in our lives, he didn't see us and say, you know what, they're worthless. They're just common. They have no value. He didn't just get rid of us like he could have. No, he said, they're worth something. You're worth something. So Jesus came. He died on a cross for us. And then he was resurrected from the grave, showing that he has the power and the authority behind his message of love. So it's really a message of value. The Easter message is a message of worth, that you're worth something. But you know, when you looked at us from the outside in, from God's perspective, you could see how you could make a case for our fallen condition and us not being worth much. Because if you look at our condition, the way that we had ruined everything God created when he set up that initial paradise on earth and he put his first creations in it and he said, this is good. From that point on, when he created it, we've done nothing but destroy and unravel the beauty that God had created in this world. It was our sinfulness and humanity, and all of us have been a part of that has brought violence into the world and wars. We've brought poverty and sickness and famine and death and destruction. All these things came as a result of sin. It wasn't part of God's original creation. So you could make a case that because of that, our condition, that there wasn't much value there. I'm not really a sports card collector anymore, but I'm a basketball fan, and I know that in the sports cards world, that if you have a valuable card, you can send it away. You got a valuable basketball player, let's say a Steph Curry card, you could send it away, and they will rate it for you. They call it grading cards, and they'll give it a number value, 1 through 10. And they will assign value based on the condition of that card. They'll say, this card's a 6. We looked at it under a microscope, and the corners are not bent. It doesn't have any water stains on it. It's not wrinkled. This is a 9. And they'll go a number 1 through 10, and they'll put it on there, and they'll lock this case, and they'll send it back to you, and it increases the value of that card. But the problem is if they send it back to you, and they give you a card, and it's like a 4, you can't change it when you get it back. You can't make it an 8. You can't just say, well, man, I really wish this was an 8 or a 9 or a 10. It is what it is. It's been up. It's in a bad condition or it's not. There's not anything that you can actually do about it. And our problem, our sin condition, we don't always realize it. Maybe we came in here today thinking, well, it's not that big of a deal. But we don't understand the state of our condition, because some of us think, well, maybe my problem is just that I'm bad, that I don't do things right. I need to get better. And if our problem was only just that we need to improve and get better, if we could really change the condition, then we wouldn't really need Jesus. We wouldn't need a resurrection. But the problem is so much bigger than that. It's not just that we needed to get better. It's not that we were bad. It's that we were, as the Bible says, that we were dead in our sins. We desperately needed him to save us because our condition was bad. It wasn't something that you and I could just get. I mean, if it was just something we could fix, then we just need to get smarter. We just need to work harder. That's religion. If I could just work harder, if I can pull my life together, then God will look at me and say, well, wow, look what you've done. Now you're a 10. No, we can't change our own condition. We needed God's help. We needed his intervention. God first created the earth. His first 2 people, Adam and Eve, they were in the midst of this beautiful paradise that God had created. And from the very beginning, there was something behind the lure, the temptation to sin, to miss God's plan, miss his mark for us, to do our own thing. And that, what was behind that was a person. It was the devil. The devil has always been trying to ruin the good that God created, and he's what's behind sin. And so he deceived this first couple and said, hey, I know what God has said is right, but there's a better way. Why don't you do it your way? Why don't you do this instead? Just dismiss what God has said. And ever since that time when man first departed from God's plan and went their own route, we've been unraveling this beautiful creation that God has had from the beginning. And the devil, he's been deceiving us from the beginning. He's the father of lies. He lies to us about ourselves, our past. He lies to us about our future. He pulls us away from God's word and his church. He lies to us about the decisions that we make and the consequences. And there was a verse that I came across recently, and I had read it many times before, but I saw it in new light. Maybe it's because of some of the conversations that I've had with some friends lately. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, it says, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. And when I heard that word, it really caught me differently than it had in the past. Because I thought about it, I'm like, oh, the devil, that's what he's been doing in my life all these years. He's scheming. He's thinking up ways to get me to step off of God's path onto my own path. He's scheming. You ever thought about that, how the devil's a schemer? The Bible says he's the father of lies. He's always lying to you. He lied to Adam and Eve. He's lying to people, and he's always trying to deceive us and pull us, tempt us toward doing things our own way, what we think is right, instead of what God says is right. And in so doing, he unravels God's plan for us and holds us back. And it's corrupt thinking that he gets us to start thinking different ways other than God's ways, and we kind of think our own ways, but it's so much bigger than that. It's not just bad thinking, because if it was, we could just improve our thinking. There's a sinful state that we live in when we're outside of a relationship with God and we've been deceived, and there's really a battle going on for our soul that we don't see. And I put it this way in your teaching notes: don't underestimate the gravity of deception. The devil deceives, and gravity, that pull, it's strong and it has consequences. And the devil, what he wants to do is he wants to pull you away from a relationship with Jesus. So the reason Jesus came was to restore, to bring us back on the right path, to restore our potential. When we've been deceived, to bring us truth. He came, as it says in John 3, not to condemn, but to bring life, to point us to the Father. That's why he came. And there was a conversation that happened right around the time that Jesus was finishing his earthly ministry, right before he was crucified and then before he resurrected. There's this conversation that he had with Simon Peter. And the first part of it happened before the resurrection. The second part happened after. And this conversation where he takes Peter from where he is to where he needs to go, I believe can be life-transforming for us today, and it's really at the heart of the Easter message. And so if we can, I just want to go ahead and jump right into this story in Luke chapter 22. In Luke chapter 22, I think this is going to help us see some of the lies of the enemy in our life, some of the ways that we have missed out on what God wants for us, and then see the heart of the Father to restore us, the heart of Jesus, why he came, why he died for us. Hopefully this will encourage you in your faith, no matter how long you've been walking with Jesus. Maybe it'll bring faith into your life if you kind of feel like you're outside looking in. The story about Simon Peter, a guy much like us, he had his flaws and he had his problems, and he's in a conversation with Jesus right before Jesus goes to the cross. In Luke 22, verse 31, Jesus says to him, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." But he replied, "Lord, I'm ready to go to prison and to death." He says, I'm not going to deny you. I'm not going to lose my faith. Verse 34, Jesus answered, "I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me." So Jesus says, Peter, listen, you're going to struggle in your faith. You're going to go through a hard time. You're going to deny me. And Peter says, "No, Jesus. I've been walking with you for 3 years. I believe in you. I've been following you. I will not fail you." But he's self-deceived. He trusts his own gut, his own opinion, his own experience more than he trusts in Jesus' word. Jesus knows what will happen. Peter thinks he knows what will happen. And Peter trusts more in himself than he does in his Lord, and he gets himself into trouble. He's self-deceived without even knowing it. This happens to us all the time. Sometimes we think we know what's happening. We're very certain of it, but we don't know. My youngest child, we got 4 kids. My youngest daughter, Macy, came to me when she was only 4 years old, and she walked up to me, and she's looking cute, and I put my hand on her little head, and I said, "Oh, your hair. Macy, your hair is really soft." And she's so expressive, so confident when she speaks, and she says, "Yeah, Dad, it's because I put air conditioning in it. This much, not hair conditioner, air conditioning." And she was so certain she knew what she had done to her. I put air conditioning in it. You know, she was confident, and I know I've done that many times in my life, and you have too, right? We've been confident in something, and then later on, through life experience, maybe through consequence, maybe through wisdom and maturity, we look back and we say, that thing that I was so certain about, I was actually self-deceived. And Peter here at this point in his life, he's walked with Jesus for 3 years, and he says, "I know I will not deny you. I will not fail you." Jesus says, "Peter, you will." And Peter went on and he dismissed Jesus' words. He elevated and asserted his own opinion and his own ideas to God's level. We do this when we say, "I know what the Bible says, but I think." Or, But what makes more sense to me, I know God wants this, but what makes more sense, and the devil is deceiving us because he's putting us in a spot where we think we are the judge and we're the higher court. We decide what's right or wrong, what's true or false, what's better or worse. And we think that we have the ability to determine that. You see this in culture all the time, that we're taught this, that we get to determine what's right or wrong. But it's inconsistent. You just watch for it. You'll see it. There's kind of this cultural idea that you can determine what's right or wrong, and so you just live whatever lifestyle you want. You just do whatever you want, live however you want, dismiss what God says. You just do whatever you want, and don't judge anybody else for how they live. And so it's very tolerant. But then when you see someone like maybe a believer who steps up and starts living by what God says is right, and it contradicts what someone in the world might say is acceptable, and they start standing up for what they believe in, then they get upset and angry. Well, you can't say that some things are wrong. No, you can. And so it's inconsistent because they won't tolerate that. Right? And so what's happening there? What's underneath all of that conversation that we hear all that noise in our culture? What's underneath that? What's underneath that is that we as people, not just they or who, it's all of us, we think that we are the judge, that we get to determine right or wrong. Now God said you get to decide. You get to decide if you will accept what's true or not. You get to decide if you will believe. We get to decide if we will trust and follow. But deciding is different than determining. And he gave us the ability to decide to believe, to decide to choose to follow him, but he did not give us the ability to determine what's true. That's already set. And when we die and we stand before God, that will be made clear to us that he is the judge. He is the one that determines what's right. But notice Jesus' words here in his conversation with Peter, how aware Jesus is of the big picture. When he says to Peter, here's what's going on, he sees the long-term situation. He's talking about what's going to happen afterward. Notice that he is aware of the spiritual battle going on, the deceiver, the devil, Satan, and his work. You know, Jesus has the big picture in mind. He sees things I don't. So I have to remember that I don't have all the information. That's why I can say sometimes, oh, I never knew that before, because I don't have all the information. And my perspective is not the highest perspective. That's why sometimes we can hold on to something that we believe, and then later on in life, we're like, we learn something new, and we say, well, I've never saw it that way before. But that never happens to God. You ever think about that? God doesn't come to a place, well, I never knew that. I never saw it that way before. God is high above, and he understands. He's the ultimate authority. He's the one that determines what's right and wrong. And he says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, down in verse 8, he says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. But what the deceiver does is he comes and he tries to get us to twist God's ways into our ways. Get us to take what is God's higher ways and kind of bring them down a little bit. Well, yeah, God, I get that, but, and we start to put in all those personal pronouns. I think this is okay. And what we're doing is we're putting our opinions as the authority above God's opinion. It's not that big of a deal. And when we say that, we're saying, I'm the judge. I get to decide if it's a big deal or not God. And so we get ourselves into trouble because the devil, and if you'll watch, he does this in your life all the time. He does it to people all the time, and we bite into it. And he isolates us. He gets us to think, well, hey, just kind of do your own thing. God's not watching. Dismiss God's guidance and make compromises. We start to ignore the warnings. We negotiate and manipulate the truth for whatever we want. And then we're done. And it just escalates. He carries us along. And you know, my kids the other day, my boys, they decided to put a bunch of army guys all around the house, and they set them all up and just hidden places. And we would just kind of go open the fridge, and there's some army guys, and we'd look up above the door frame, and there they are. They just set them all over the house. They're having fun. And then the girls, they thought they'd get into this, so they took, like, later on that day, they took their Barbies, and they went all around where the army guys were, and they kind of like trumped it with their Barbies, and they set the Barbies up all over the house. And then it just kind of kept going. The boys, they were talking that night. They're like, tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to go get the Nerf guns from the garage, and we're going to take out all the Barbies. It just kind of kept going back and forth. And you know, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but sometimes it's like, you know, the escalation, it's just like we take one step, and then there's another step, and where does it stop? Right? There's this pull. There's this draw, the gravity of deception. We just get pulled in. We make one compromise. We say, well, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. And before you know it, we're walking down a whole other path. We've left the path. one thing led to another thing, and the slippery slope, and we've gone away from God. And Peter here, he says, this absolutely will not happen to me. He's self-deceived, and he didn't even know it. I wonder how many times we're self-deceived and we don't even know it. But this leaps out to me because I think it's important to remember that God's ways, because they're higher than my ways, I need to get with him every day. I can't be my own compass. My own compass is not trustworthy. I've got to get with Jesus. I got to get in his word. I got to know his word. I got to get it inside me because I'm not good enough to navigate life by myself. I need a navigator. I need him. I need to rely on him and let his spirit lead me. Let God lead me. And as I do that, the more I get close to him, the more I rely on him and lean on him, the more my life's going to change. But there's something else here in this story that I just think is so powerful down in chapter 22, verse 32. Verse 32, we read it a moment ago. Jesus says to Peter, I've prayed for you. Think about that. Jesus says, I've prayed for you, Simon Peter, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. He's telling Peter that he cares. He's telling Peter, listen, you're going to go through something, but I'm praying for you and I'm believing in you, and I know that I've got a future plan for you. And it's in your notes here. This is why it's so important. He says, it's amazing how much Jesus cares. It's amazing how much Jesus cares. That's what he's saying to Peter. He's saying, I care. I care. And maybe you want to write that down, but think about, maybe put your name in there. He cares about you. And Peter, I know you're going to fail, but I still care. I'm praying for you. I'm in your corner. I believe in you. Some of us think that God's like on the other side and he's against us. He's trying to harm us or hold us back. And some of us have an inaccurate view of the Bible that all of God's ways, his commands, his leadings, when he says, obey me, he's trying to restrict us and keep us from all the fun. No, he's trying to free us up and trying to give us the real way to live that leads to life because he cares. And he's saying, Peter, I care about you. I believe in your future. You know, when we have failures and we have low moments, which we all do, you can never forget what Jesus is saying here to Peter. You're going to have a low moment, but I still believe in your high potential. And he would say to you, there's times where you're going to be successful and life's going to go good for you, and you're going to neglect me and forget about me. But even if you forget about me, I'll never forget about you. You might not even believe in me, but I will always believe in you. And that's what Jesus is saying here to Peter. He's saying, Peter, you're going to go through a hard time. You don't even see it. You're so self-deceived. Jesus, I'll go to prison for you. No, you won't, Peter. Not when you really get pushed on. No, you won't. And Jesus knew that, but he still believed in Peter. See, while we're fighting against him and rejecting him, Jesus was dying and resurrecting for us because he believed in you even when we did not believe in him. Let's go back to this story. Things move along here, and if we could jump down to verse 54, Jesus is apprehended. It's ultimately going to lead to his execution and his death on the cross. And down in verse 54, you see what actually happens. Then seizing him, they led him away, and they took him into the house of the high priest, and Peter followed at a distance. When some there had kindled a fire, remember that. They kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together. Peter sat down with them. And a servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight, and she looked closely at him and said, this man was with him. She recognized him. You were with Jesus. I remember you. But he denied it. Woman, I don't know him. He said, I don't know this guy. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you also were one of them. Man, I am not, Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, certainly, this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean. Peter replied, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the third time he denied Jesus, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Wow, what would that moment have felt like? He looks right at Peter, right in the eyes. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. He went outside and he cried. Severe disappointment. Awareness of his fallenness. That's a hard moment. That hurts when you let someone down who believes in you. And we've all let other people down. We've let ourselves down. We've ultimately let God down. And Peter felt the sting of that. Jesus knew ahead of time that Peter was going to fail him. he knew this. This was not a surprise, and your failures, they're not a surprise to him either. See, before he created you, he knew how you were going to let him down. He knew what it would cost him to restore you and bring you into a relationship with him. And even though he knew all it would cost him, he still gave his life for you. He still created you because he cares that much. This should encourage us so much. That God had a plan in mind for Peter even before he failed him. And what this means is this is such good news, you guys. This is so good. Just because you have a past does not disqualify you from a future. And Peter had a past. Peter had let Jesus down, but Jesus, before it happened, Jesus said, Peter, I know you're going to let me down, but when you get restored, when you come back, I've got a plan for you. Go strengthen your brothers, shepherd them. He says, Peter, I know you'll let me down, but when you come back, listen, I have a mission for you. I have a mission for you. I won't give up on you. So take heart when you feel like Peter. Whether it's the first time you become aware of that condition inside yourself of sin, or maybe it's the time when you've been walking with Jesus for a lot of years and you're trying hard to live for him, and Peter walked with Jesus for years and he still let him down. And you say, I feel like I should be past this. I feel like I should get further. I don't feel like I should fail Jesus like this, and I'm trying hard. When you become aware of your fallenness, be reminded, like Peter had to be reminded as Jesus looked at him. Hey, I'm not surprised by your failure. I knew it was going to happen. And all this time, I've always believed in you. And Jesus would say that to you today. I believe in you. I've got a plan for you. And here's the thing, when it hurts, and it hurt Peter, sometimes that hurt is a good thing because, right, hurt can lead to healing if you allow it to. And Peter was hurt. It says he went outside and he wept bitterly. So he was torn up inside. And just because you're hurting, that doesn't mean that there's not healing for you. In fact, the hurting sometimes is required so that healing could come. And when you're let down, don't give up, because that letdown might actually be what's right before God's plan and his move in your life. I put it this way in your teaching notes. Letdowns can become turnarounds when I look to Jesus. When I looked at Jesus, my letdowns, my setbacks, they can actually be God's way of turning me around and pointing him to where I need to go. And that's what happened to Peter. I wonder what was in Jesus' eyes when he looked at Peter. What did Peter experience in that moment? We don't know. We only have the words on the page, but we do know a few things. We know that when Jesus looked at Peter, it was not, Peter, I can't believe you did this, right? Because we already know that Jesus knew that Peter was going to let him down. So we know when Jesus, it said, that moment when Peter failed him, and Peter looked at Jesus right in the eyes, Jesus looked at him. We know that Jesus' eyes were not, I can't believe you did that. Don't we feel that sometimes? Like God's got to feel like I just let him down so bad, and he's got to be shaking his hand up in heaven like, I cannot believe you did that. We don't surprise him. We never surprise him. He knows what's going to happen, and he knew that about Peter. So his eyes were not this cruel, I can't believe you let me down. We know that's not true. He already knew it was going to happen. We also know that Jesus' eyes, when he looked at Peter, it was not a harsh, I told you so. It was not, Peter, I told you were going to fail me. And look at you now. Look how you messed up again. This is the self-talk, the deceiver, the devil puts in our mind. And some of you walk around with this in your head all the time. Like, I can't believe how bad I am. I'm terrible. I messed up again. I failed God. I'm not worthy. All these kinds of things. And that was not what was in Jesus' eyes. We know that because he said, Peter, I'm praying for you. I'm praying that you don't lose faith. I have a plan for you on the other side. So this whole time, Jesus believed in Peter. So he was not like, Peter, man, I can't believe you did that. I told you were going to do that. Didn't I warn you were going to? That's not what it was. His eyes believed in the potential of Peter. His eyes were not focused on all the ways that Peter failed him. His eyes, as he looked into Peter, were saying, Peter, there's a future for you. I believe in you. I have something better planned for you. And it sure hurts when we let people down that believe in us, and it sure hurts when we let God down. But he's never going to let you go. You might let him down, but he won't let you go. He won't give up on you. He loves you too much, and he knew that Peter was going to fail him, but he cared about him. He believed in him, and he believes in you, and you have no idea. You can't even imagine how much God believes in you. You have no idea. I don't have any idea. God believes in you so much. He wants so much for you. And when he looked at Peter, this is the thing. He saw a better version of Peter. He sees a better version of your marriage. When he looks at it, you just see the state it's in. You're like, man, I can't believe it's like this. And he says, man, this could be so much better. I believe in what can happen here. You look at yourself when you look in the mirror and you say, I can't believe I've dropped the ball so many times. I can't believe how much I failed. And Jesus, when he looks at that same face, he says, you have no idea. I'm not looking at your past. I'm looking at your potential. There's so much more here. See, Jesus, when he looks at you, he knows that there is more. There's always more that he has in store. And when he looked at Peter, it was not a look of disapproval. It was a look of, I believe in you, Peter. I've been praying for you. Come on, let's keep going. Well, this story, thankfully, did not end here with Peter weeping bitterly and broken and outside alone, having rejected our Savior. No, that didn't end there. In fact, if we turn over to John chapter 21, you see the second part of the conversation. It happened after the resurrection. And in John 21, it's pretty cool. There's this experience they had with Jesus after he's resurrected. And what would that have been like? Because they saw him crucified. It was very public. And everybody saw him die. They pierced his side. I mean, he was dead. Heart stopped beating. They buried him in the grave. I mean, he was done. And they knew it. Like, it was over. But then he started showing up in some crazy places. I mean, just imagine they're in this upper room one time. They're eating together. And all of a sudden, Jesus just shows up. He just walks in. Hey, guys, what's happening? It's like, whoa, are you kidding me, right? There's another story, if you read the New Testament, it's really interesting where these two guys are walking along the path. And Jesus just comes up. He just joins in the conversation. He's walking along. They don't know it's him. They're just not paying attention, talking to each other. So it's like this third wheel in the party. And then all of a sudden, they realize, whoa, it's Jesus. You know, it's like he just keeps showing up. Hundreds of people he showed himself to. It's crazy. Well, one of those experiences is recorded for us here in John chapter 21, down in verse 1. I love this story. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, so that was James and John, and two other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and they got into the boat. But that night, they caught nothing. They're going back to what they used to do. They were fishermen before they met Jesus. Jesus has died. Maybe they've given up hope. Maybe they've been discouraged. But they go back to fishing. They went back to what's comfortable. And you know what I've noticed in my life? I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes when we get going for God, we start moving in a certain direction, it's real easy for me to take a step back into how I used to be. Well, I'm making progress, but then I get a setback, and I think, well, I'll go back. This is more comfortable. This is easier. And maybe that's what's happening here. These guys are going back to what's familiar. They've experienced the divine. They've seen God do all these amazing things. But now, let's just go back to what we're used to. And it goes on here in verse 4. They've been fishing all night. It says they caught nothing, absolutely nothing. Verse 4, early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, hey, friends, haven't you any fish? He knew. They said, nope, we haven't caught anything. Verse 6, he said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. You know, they've been fishing all night, and they caught nothing. They were discouraged. They were defeated. You ever had an unsuccessful season in life? You ever go through a hard spot? We all do, right? You've had a hard week, hard month. You might be in the middle of a hard year, right? I mean, you go through hard times, and these guys, it's discouraging. Sometimes the Lord needs to identify the problem, which hurts, before he can get to a solution. You guys catch anything? How's it going? Sometimes he has to make us aware of the things that are not working in our life. Sometimes he has to call out the things that we don't like, that are not going well, before he can get to the root issue, right? And so, hey, how's it going? Not going well. They're discouraged, they're defeated, they're exhausted. You ever been exhausted? My brother was down a few weeks ago, and we went out to Clearwater Beach, and we were walking Pier 60, and they had the trampoline bouncers there. Have you guys seen those, the trampoline bouncers? I've seen those there for a lot of years now, and I thought it was cool, but I've never done it with my kids, and my brother's like, hey, let's take my kids and your kids, and let's go have them do the trampoline bouncers. I'm like, oh, that's cool, let's do it. You know, and I always thought it was cute to see the kids jumping, and thought it was fun, but all right, let's go. So the kids all go out and they strap in and they're all bouncing, and my brother talked him into a deal. They normally go 5 minutes. He's like, can we get an extra couple minutes? It was not a busy night, so they got to jump for like 7 whole minutes. The whole 7 minutes. They're just bouncing. They're flipping. I'm like, come on, let's see what you got. And they're just like backflip, front flip. I mean, they're just doing all kinds of stuff. They're so light, you know. You got your arms on these bungees and your feet just the whole time you're bouncing. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. They're doing all this stuff, and we're cheering them on, taking pictures. And then my brother comes over to me toward the end of that time. He's like, hey, here you go. And he's got 2 tickets in his hand. He's like, you and me, let's go. I'm like you and me, we're going to go out there? He's like, have you ever done it before? And I don't know, I've bungee jumped. I've done some fun things like this with bungees, but I couldn't remember, honestly. I was like, I don't know. I don't think I have, maybe, but I mean, I've seen these things for years, but I don't think so. He's like, well, then let's go. So we go out there and we strap in and we're asking the workers while we're getting all set. We're like, how long do you guys do this for? You know, they're giving us these 7 minutes. We're like, you guys do this, like, how do you guys go, like, all afternoon when you get, like, free time? And they're like, no. Like, you do not want to go more than 7 minutes. Like this will destroy you. Like, this is really hard. It's like, how hard can it be? Just seeing these kids, like, this is not that hard. So we get strapped in and we start going for it. And the first minute or two was fine. I'm bouncing around, I'm having a good time. Like, the kids are, like, taunting me, like, come on, Dad, can you do a flip? I did a flip. I'm like, I'll show you what's up, kid. Come on, I'm going to teach you how to do a flip. So I'm trying to do a flip and front flip. I do a back flip now. I'm trying to do a back flip. It's a lot of work, and I'm getting tired. I'm only, like, 2 minutes in. I got 5 minutes to go. And I'm just jumping and flipping, and they're just egging me on. Come on, Dad. And, like, 4 minutes into it, I'm, like, waiting for the buzzer to go off. I'm like, come on. I don't need a full 7 minutes. Let's go. But I wasn't going to quit because then they're going to just mess with me, right? So I just had to survive for like another 3 minutes. I'm hanging, right? I'm just like tired. I'm like just hanging, literally just hanging there. And one of my boys is like, Dad, you know we're getting this on video, right? And then I got my cell phone out and they're like getting a video. I'm just my arms are tired from holding these bungees. My legs are tired. I've been flipping, so my abs are tired. I play basketball every week. I work out, but this is the best workout I've ever got. I'm exhausted. I'm hanging there. I'm just tired, right? I'm beat up. And finally, the buzzer sounds. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for saving me. I get off the trampoline, and I'm just beating. I go to my bro. And he's like, did you ever done this before? I'm like, dude, you know how I didn't know beforehand? Like, I know confidently I have never done that before. I'll remember this the rest of my life, and I'll never do it again. Every time I walk past Pier 60, it's not going to be like, oh, look at those cute kids. It's going to be like serious respect. Take my hat off. Future Olympians. That's incredible. Like, that's amazing. I don't know how they do it, but I was exhausted, man. It was a workout. I was tired. And some of us kind of, we feel that way right now. It's, oh, man, I'm barely getting by. I'm surviving. I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. Yeah, I feel defeated. Some of us feel like that way spiritually. Maybe we used to really love Jesus and follow him, and we're full on for him, but now things have changed and we've kind of faded. We bought into some lies of the devil. Maybe we didn't realize it. Maybe we've wondered. Maybe we've stepped back. Maybe we had some questions, read something on the internet, whatever it is. And we just kind of now, it's hard to get that fire back. And we feel like it's dead inside of us. We're just kind of floating along. We don't like the alternative of disbelief. But we're not there yet, and then some of us, it's not the faith thing, it's just a pure exhaustion thing. I'm weary, I've been beaten up in the world, I've been trying to live for Jesus, nothing's going right. We come into these seasons and we just feel dead inside. And what I want you to know is that what Jesus specializes in, what he's really good at, what he lived, what he modeled, what he taught, is that dead things can come back to life. That he can resurrect what's dead inside of you and bring it back. Your relationship that's fallen apart, your future dreams you've given up on. Listen, God's got more in store for you, so don't you give up on him. He ain't gonna give up on you. In fact, to put it this way in your notes, stuck and finished are two very different things. Stuck and finished are two different things. When Jesus died on the cross and he said it's finished, he was not referring to Peter. Well, Peter failed me. It's finished. The whole movement is done. The whole church I started is going to fall apart now. My disciples, the ones I mentored, they left me. It's over. No, he didn't do that. He meant it's finished, meaning this whole business of sin and death, conquering and defeating. No, listen, that's done. I'm conquering death today, and now there can be life. For those who believe, for those who follow, they can be restored. Those who let me down, that could just be a setup for a turnaround. See, stuck and finished are two different things, and you might feel finished today, and the truth is you're just stuck. So do what Peter did. What did Peter do? He got out of that boat and he went to Jesus. See, here's the story. Here it is in John 21, verse 7. Verse 7, then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say that, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped in the water. Can I just pause here? Like this makes me laugh. Like he put on his outer garment and then because he had taken it off. I love the authenticity of the Bible. He was fishing in his underwear. That's what was going on here. And I also noticed that it says the disciple whom Jesus loved. See, scholars have always believed that John wrote this book. That's why they call it John. And John here is referring to himself. And he's saying the disciple Jesus loved. When you get to write the book, you get to say, I was his favorite. I think that's what's going on. But actually, a lot of people believe that they were best friends. In fact, if you studied it, like when he was on the cross, Jesus said, "Behold, Mary, this is your son," referring to John, and John, "Behold, this is your mother." And what he was saying is, John, take care of my mother. We're best friends. I can't be here to take care of her in the flesh, so you take care of her. And so they were tight. And John's writing this whole story, and he's writing it down. Peter puts his garment on. And then verse 8, the other disciples, verse 7, Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord." He jumped in the water. Verse 8, the other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire burning. Remember, there's a fire burning with coals there, with fish on it, and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat, dragged the net ashore, and it was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the other disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Breakfast on the beach with Jesus. What an amazing thing. What an amazing sight to remember. For those of us who have time alone with the Lord, and there's no better way to start the day than to spend some time with the Lord, I want you to remember this story right here. Jesus is saying, "Peter, come have breakfast with me. Let's spend some time together. I care about you." Now think about it. Peter has a deeper need here. He's got a root issue, which is he's struggling with failure and denying Christ. Jesus knew that he was going to address that, but he started with what was on Peter's mind. What was on Peter's mind? Peter was hungry. Peter had fished all night. He'd caught nothing. And Jesus has some fish for him there on the fire. See, sometimes when we spend time with the Lord, we're praying for something, and Jesus will work with us on that. He'll work with what our need is, what we've identified the need is, but he's identified a deeper need. And you don't get to that until you spend some time with him. But Jesus was after something deeper, but he started where Peter was. He started with the problem that he had in that moment. I love that Peter didn't delay. He knew he had a problem, and he swam to Jesus. I actually kind of think this is a funny moment too, because Peter, it says he swam to shore. We're not told how he got there. And I have this theory because remember one of the times that Peter had with Jesus, he walked on water. Do you remember that amazing story? And Peter sees Jesus on the shore. This is not pre-resurrection Jesus. This is post-resurrection Jesus. Now he can do all things. Like he's conquered even death. And Peter knows that before they were walking on water, he sees Jesus. The only thing between them is 100 yards of water. I think that it had to cross Peter's mind. I should just walk on the water. I mean, if it's ever going to happen, it's going to be now. Like, don't you think that have you ever been in that side of a pool and just like try to see how far that you could run on the water before you fall in? You just like spin your legs real fast and see how far I think Peter at least did that. I'm going to give it a try. And if I can run across the water, I'll get there faster. If not, I'll swim, and he ended up swimming, right? I don't know. Maybe it happened. Maybe it didn't. But Peter goes right to Jesus. He knows that he has a problem, and he runs right to him. And he has breakfast with Jesus. And then notice down in John chapter 21, look down in verse 9. It says, when they landed, they saw the fire burning with coals, and there was fish on it and some bread. The last time that we know of that Peter was around a charcoal fire, just a few days before, he had denied Christ. Maybe as Jesus was building that fire, he was trying to associate the two for Peter to say, in every area of your life where you fail, I can bring redemption. Where there's ashes, I can bring beauty. And maybe you have an area of your life that you've just kind of given up on, written off, and said that'll never work, that'll never happen. I burned the bridge. And maybe Jesus would look at you today and say, hey, that area that's smoldering, I can bring something beautiful out of that. And there was a breakfast there right on that same fire that Peter had denied Christ on. There was now something that was going to be nutritious and help him. And here in the story as it goes on in verse 15, the final part of this, it says, when they had finished eating, so they had spent some serious time together before Jesus gets to the deeper need. See, you're not going to microwave your relationship with God. You got to be walking with him every day. You got to be in his word daily in prayer. You got to be in worship weekly. If you want Jesus to really work like he wants to work in your life, You can't do that at a sprint. And he spends some time with him, and then he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. See, Jesus was trying to communicate a message to Peter. And looking at the words on the page, we don't understand all that's happening there. In fact, even scholars who study this don't fully understand what was happening. But what they can tell you is that the first 2 of the 3 times that Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? He used this word agape in the original language. He says, do you agape me? This full-on devotion, this full commitment, not an emotional feeling like, do you really love me? This commitment. It's all spoken about all throughout the New Testament. It's the love that's spoken of in 1 Corinthians 13, this agape, real, genuine love. Do you love me? And Peter answers not with that kind of agape love. He says, I phileo you, this brotherly love, this friendship love that's more of an emotional love. I phileo you. And Jesus asked him again, well, do you love me? Do you agape me? I phileo you. Second time. The third time, Jesus says, do you phileo me? And he answers, I phileo you. And what some people believe that what was happening here is that Jesus was coming to the level of where Peter was at. He was meeting him where he was. This is all I can, this is the kind of love I have for you. I've failed you. I don't know if I can do the agape love right now, Jesus. I thought I could because before I said, I'm in, agape, all the way. I'll die for you. But now I realize I can't do it. Good. Let's start there. I'm going to start with where you are. You realize where you're at. Let's start there and we can build from there. You see where you're at. Let's start with phileo. You're back to fishing. Let's start with fishing. But I'm not going to leave you there. What happened? He said, every time, will you feed my sheep? Feed my sheep. He was trying to take him from where he was a fisherman, and he was saying, I got something better. I want you to be a shepherd. I want you to shepherd my people. And if you'll go with me on this journey, Peter, if you'll stick with me, if you'll follow me, I can take you from where you are to where you need to be. And then Peter eventually did give his life for Christ. Under Nero, he was crucified. Actually, he volunteered to be crucified upside down because he said, I'm not worthy to die like Jesus died. And he did get to agape love. In fact, he wrote in his letter in 1 Peter chapter 5, he talks about to the church, he said, shepherd the flock that God's entrusted to you. He's now thinking like a shepherd. He's not thinking like a fisherman anymore because Jesus met him where he was and he'll meet you wherever you are. You're saying, I'm not good enough. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I believe. I've got questions. Fine, good. Just bring it as you are. You don't got to fix your life up and come to Jesus and say, now I'm ready to follow you. Now I'm worthy. You'll never get there. Come as you are and say, Jesus, I'm ready. Let's go. Wherever I am, whether it's day 1 or you've been walking for 21 years, 21 days, doesn't matter. Jesus says, wherever you are, I'll meet you there and we can go. We can go forward. I got a future plan for you. See, Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and I don't think it was a coincidence that Jesus asked him 3 times, do you love me? He was saying, for everywhere you failed me, there's forgiveness. You can't exhaust my forgiveness. Every time you fail, I'm there to forgive if you'll come to me. You can't exhaust God's forgiveness. You might have done some unlovely things, but he still loves you. And that's just what I love about Jesus. I love that about him. And whatever in our lives that we feel defeated, whatever we feel dead, Jesus can bring it back to life. One of my favorite places in Florida is the Florida Keys. It's just a short drive away, and a lot of people never go down there. And this is a beautiful place. It's got this island, tropical feel. And we met a teacher down there one time, and she said that her kids, when they come up this way to Central Florida, they'll take pictures of all the squirrels because we got squirrels running around everywhere and climbing the trees. And said that's different because in the Florida Keys, they got iguanas running around everywhere, climbing trees. It's just like our squirrels to us are iguanas to them. They have iguanas everywhere. And one of the guys I was talking to down there, his name was Marty. Marty said, so these iguanas, they sleep up in the trees, but whenever it gets cold, and we go through a cold snap, and it might get down 48 to 44 degrees or cooler, whenever that happens, these iguanas who are sleeping up in the trees, because they're cold-blooded creatures, meaning they don't keep this constant blood temperature like us, their blood temperature and thus their energy comes from their environment. And when it drops really cold, something happens in their blood. And what happens is these iguanas are sleeping in the trees. They'll just literally fall dead out of the tree. And you'll come the next day and you'll walk around your yard. You'll walk around, your school, and you'll just see all these iguanas just laying lifeless all over next to the pool, on the ground. And just literally, they'll pick them up, carry them away. Some people that don't know what's going on, they'll pick them up, they'll go take them over, they'll drop them in the trash. One guy in 2010, a news story came out. He went around, grabbed a bunch of these iguanas, and filled up the back of his station wagon. He's taking care of the problem, just cleaning up all these dead iguanas. But the thing is, when someone picks up those iguanas and they throw them in the trash, they think they're dead, but they're not actually dead. See, they go into this coma-like state, but they're not actually dead. It looks like they are if you look at it, but they're not dead. They're actually still alive, and it's creepy to see them climb up out of the trash can, right? I mean, this guy that had him in the station wagon, they said he almost caused an accident because they came back to life in his vehicle and were climbing on his back all in his vehicle. Can you imagine, right? They thought they're dead. This thing looks dead, and they throw it away, but it's not dead. It's alive. And some of us have given up. We've trashed what God gave to us. We have destroyed the life that he gave to us. We've written it off. We've written off our future, our potential. And God would look at you and say, you look at it. You've given up. You've thrown it away, but there is still life. There is more yet to come if you'll trust me, if you'll do what Peter did, if you'll look to me, if you'll run to me, if you'll give your life to me, there is more. So I left it this way in your teaching notes. The final question is, where do I personally need to have more trust in the resurrecting power of Jesus? Where? Some of you feel dead inside. You feel spiritually lost. Maybe you feel directionless, disappointed, lonely, hopeless. I don't know where you are. Maybe you feel the chains of an addiction in your life or a struggle. But wherever you are, wherever you've run to from Christ, wherever you've rejected him, I just would like to say to you today to look like Peter did to Jesus. It might hurt at first because you have to acknowledge your sin before you can find healing. Jesus, my bad. I'm so sorry. But thank you for your grace. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for not giving up on me. And wherever you feel that death in your life, you need to know that through Jesus there can be life and forgiveness and restoration and help and strength and healing and hope if you'll trust him. So where is it for you? Where is it for you? If you'll trust him, he will show you that he can bring life even where there's death. Right on?
Thanks for joining us at Church Experience Online. Please don't forget to check out the website if you'd like to get more connected, learn more, get your questions answered, or support this movement financially. You're now going to hear a Church Experience Worship original song, and we hope this gives you an opportunity to worship and reflect on what you learned today.
Overwhelmed in the battle, heading to defeat, holding on to the promise, you fight for me. Overpowered by the storm and by the raging sea, anchored onto the promise, you're holding me. Your love is strong, you've broken every bond. I'm taking heart. You overcome. Climbing over the mountain.